Good morning. Welcome to First Unitarian Church of Alton. My name is Peg Flack, and Dennis Fisher will be joining us in this service to you for Sunday, May 30th, 2021. Our sermon title today is Lay of the Land. First UU of Alton is a small lay-led congregation on the bluffs of the Mississippi River. Special welcome if you're here exploring our fellowship today, because we're glad you're here and hope that you'll join us again in our faith community. Here we seek to offer a truly inclusive message as Unitarian Universalists. We begin our worship with a prelude.
Listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters. Hush, hush. Those who have died have never left. The dead are not under the earth. They are in the rustling trees. They are in the groaning woods. They are in the crying grass. They are in the moaning rocks. The dead are not under the earth. So listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters. Hush, hush. Those who have died have never left. The dead have a pact with the living. They are in the woman's breast. They are in the wailing child. They are with us in our homes. They are with us in this crowd. The dead have a pact with the living. So listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters.
We have a tradition in our fellowship of lighting a chalice as we begin our service, and we speak these words. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope in celebration of the life we share together.
Hi, I'm Dennis Fisher. Thanks so much for listening to the service today. Look forward to the day when we can get together again in your beautiful historic church in Alton. But for now, obviously, we have to use Zoom. I have some opening words from a Native American poem. Turtles sleep on my belly. I was one day opening my heart and singing, dreaming in the sky and calling thunder, feeling the fingers of the moon, feeling that soft light, feeling the water on my fingers.
Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I hear your heartbeat. Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I hear your heartbeat. Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I hear your heartbeat. Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I hear your heartbeat. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ya hey ya, hey ya, ho. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ho. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ya hey ya, hey ya, ho. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ho. Mother, I hear you in the river song. Eternal waters flowing on and on. Mother, I hear you in the river song. Eternal waters flowing on and on. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ya hey ya, hey ya, ho. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ho. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ya hey ya, hey ya, ho. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ho. Father, I see you when the eagle flies. Light of the Spirit's gonna take us higher. Father, I see you when the eagle flies. Light of the Spirit's gonna take us higher. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ya hey ya, hey ya, ho. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ho. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ya hey ya, hey ya, ho. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ho. Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I hear your heartbeat. Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I hear your heartbeat. Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I hear your heartbeat. Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I hear your heartbeat. Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I hear your heartbeat.
I have three brief readings, all by Native American writers. The first one's by John Lamedeer, who's a member of the Sioux tribe. Listen to the air. You can hear it, feel it, smell it, taste it. Waniawakan, the holy air, which renews all by its breath. Waniawakan, spirit, life, breath, renewal. It means all that. Wania, we sit together. Don't touch, but something is there. We feel it between us as a presence. A good way to start thinking about nature. Talk about it. Rather, talk to it. Talk to the rivers, to the lakes, to the wind as our relatives. The next one is by Audrey Shenandoah, member of the Onondaga tribe. Being born human to this earth is a very sacred trust. We have a sacred responsibility because of the special gift we have, which is beyond the fine gifts of plant life, the fish, the woodlands, the birds, all other living things on earth. We are able to take care of them. And the final reading is from a song for the passage rite of a girl named Kawaka. A poor man takes the songs in his hand and drops them near the place where the sun sets. See, Kawaka, run to them and take them in your hand and place them under the sunset.
However we meet, we're held in love and find communion with each other. No walls confine us. May our faith be strengthened, and may our practice of inclusive kindness enrich all our lives. And we'll just place a little reminder here that contributions to the sustenance of this church are certainly welcome through mail or the online Givelify app. That information will be displayed for your reference. Thank you. To the work of the church, which is weaving a tapestry of love we call community, we dedicate ourselves, and these are offerings. And now our sermon, Lay of the Land, and our speaker for today, Dennis Fisher.
There's a hint of dusk in the lengthening shadows. The light softens, diffusing a golden tinge to the shoreline. A southwest breeze stirs the branches of the many trees along the shore, sending a cascade of leaves drifting to the river's surface. I'm on Horseshoe Lake, once a bend in the Mississippi River. I dip the blade of the paddle into the water, pull back on the paddle shaft with my lower hand, while simultaneously pushing forward with my upper hand. I am propelled forward, silently gliding across the water, parting the leaves with my bow. I am a kayaker. More specifically, I'm a frame and skin kayaker. I prefer a collapsible, aluminum-framed, flexible skin kayak, one whose design DNA mimics the traditional Inuit kayak of the North. The reason for my allegiance is that a frame and skin kayak flexes with the movement of the water. It doesn't resist the water, but rather submits. When gliding across a body of water, the frame kayak gently gives in to the will of the water, flexing, subtly shifting shape, organically following the energy of the water's waveforms. I feel myself merging with the flow of nature, becoming a part of nature's rhythm, a part of the greater world around me. When I'm kayaking in my little flexible boat, I'm as content as I can be, feeling as close to a oneness with nature as a clumsy mammal like me is capable of. I have a theory about why being on the water in my kayak is so extraordinarily satisfying. I think that the gentle, fluid, cushioned experience calls up submerged memories of the most anxiety-free and content time of my or anyone's life. The time before we're introduced to the existentially neurotic world of conscious existence. The only time in our life when we live completely in the moment, at one with the world. Yes, I think that floating in my kayak recalls the wordless emotional memory of the time spent in the womb. Now, I may be reading too much into my kayak trips, but regardless of the source of my contentment, it's always a lovely experience and always puts me in touch with the wonder of nature, puts me in touch with my own better nature. And perhaps best of all, after you've paddled a while, you can set the paddle aside and just float. The boat begins to move with the currents, pushed by the wind, and goes where it will. The soothing movement and the embrace of the elements relaxes you. And then your mind, just like the kayak, drifts and goes where it will. I look around the landscape and I wonder at its composition, how it is as it has to be, given the many variables that have contributed to its nature. When I visit a new place, I don't focus on the man-made objects. I look at the lay of the land. While others are gawking at the Eiffel Tower, I am sizing up its relationships to the land, noting its distance from a nearby river, its elevation relative to the surrounding landscape, trying to figure out what it is about the landscape that made an area so seductive for human settlement, for animals as well, how the landscape might have shaped the history of the place. The influence of Ice Age glaciers created much of our local landscape, where many watersheds converge and makes our corner of the world a nexus for animals and mankind. Now it's home to urban mankind, but this landscape was once the nurturing environment to a native people for an extraordinarily long length of time. Our best guess now is that natives roamed the prairies and watershed woodlands of Illinois and Missouri for about 14,000 years, having been absent from this landscape only for the past 150, 160 years or so. Remarkably, these people, having spent more than 99% of the last 14 millennium as hunters and gatherers in this very spot, are almost forgotten to the current inhabitants of the region. The area was vital to native travel and commerce, a crossroads for native cultures for thousands of years. The great native metropolis of Cahokia is just a short walk from Horseshoe Lake, a metropolis that was the largest city in North America during its heyday, bigger than London, England, a thriving place that is now a World Heritage Site, and many of its system of mounds are still visible along the Mississippi River floodplain. St. Louis, in fact, was once called Mound City because of so many Indian mounds in the area. Unfortunately, many of them have been have been leveled. I resume paddling, view my surroundings. The Mississippi, Missouri, and Illinois rivers and their tributaries were used for thousands of years by Native Americans, utilizing birch bark and dugout canoes. And I apologize, some people are made uneasy by the term Native Americans and some by the term Indians, but we know who we're talking about, and no disrespect is meant, but I need to communicate who I'm talking about. So they used these rivers and tributaries and utilized birch bark and dugout canoes. The landscape I see around the lake is similar to what the natives would have seen, but now the landscape is dotted with structures built by man, many of them abandoned relics of long gone industries. In the distance from the lake, surrounded by forest and open pastures and fields, I can see the skyline of St. Louis and its wonderful arch commemorating westward expansion. Both the Indians and European settlers chose to locate near the base of the nearby bluffs for the same reason. It's a place closest to the river that rises above the floodplain, making it convenient to the many resources of the river without fear of losing the settlement to annual floodwaters. I noticed a turtle on a log. Had I started earlier in the day, I would have seen dozens of turtles sunning themselves on the various logs and branches that litter the lake, detritus of erosion and windstorms that provide perfect ecosystems for the many animals that still inhabit this part of the Mississippi River Valley. I try to paddle quietly, but as I get close to the turtle, senses my presence and quickly eases into the water. He follows a law of nature that suggests it's wise to be wary of a creature much larger than you. I wonder about mankind losing its connection to nature via the evolving modern lifestyle. Scholars suggest that there have been about 50,000 generations of modern humans that have been born, lived their lives, and returned to the earth. Only the last 4 or so of those 50,000 generations of humans have been predominantly urban, part of an environment shaped by human hand and technology. Almost the entirety of human history, over 1 million years or so, up to living memory, humans were either hunter-gatherers or agrarian, intimately connected to the earth, nature, the seasons, acutely aware on a daily basis of their intimate connection to and dependence upon the wonder and vagaries of the natural world. You and I, friends, are at the disquieting forefront of human beings whose existence is not connected to nature on an intimate daily basis. After 50,000 generations of people connected to the earth, I read recently that this is the first generation in the history of the world that spends more time staring at virtual realities on a screen than actually experiencing organic life. That's an astonishing bit of research to me, that the average human American spends more than half their day involved in virtual activities. As a result, I believe we've become indifferent to nature at our own peril, it would seem. Too many of us have lost track of Mother Earth and our ancestors who trod this earth back into the shadows of time, at a great loss to our spirit and well-being. Not only have we lost touch with nature, I fear we've lost touch with our fellow human beings, but that's a topic for another sermon. I paddle a bit further along the shore and notice a movement in my periphery, a slight wake in the water to my right and slightly behind me. After a moment, it dawns on me that the point of the wake is created by the just discernible brow of a muskrat. I presume I've shared the water with muskrats many times, but rarely so close. I'm a little uneasy as it gets near me, just out of arm's reach, just inches below me in the water. A muskrat up close looks disturbingly like a giant house rat, not so cute and benign like my friend the turtle. I hit the water with the flat blade of my paddle and he dives under the surface, emerging later further along the shore in a cluster of exposed tree roots where he probably has an underwater opening to a den. I think we're both a bit relieved to have some distance between us. So who are the people who for 14,000 years trod the ground we sit upon at this moment? I've been intrigued by this for many years. When my ancestors first came to Greene County, Illinois in the 1820s, Indians still lived along the various watersheds informed by the lower Illinois River. A book from the 1800s mentions how my ancestors, the Wyatts, had friendly interaction with the Indians who often encamped on a creek near the Wyatts' log cabin. But pressures from the encroachment of European settlers like the Wyatts, as well as brutally broken treaties and forced displacement, meant that by the end of the 1830s, American Indians were almost completely gone from the local river valleys. Some years ago, I received a summer fellowship to study the transition period between native culture and that of European settlers that had occurred so abruptly in the early 1800s here in Illinois and throughout the Midwest. Found it fascinating and disturbing that native cultures could thrive for 14,000 years and then just completely disappear in a couple of decades. The natives walked the woodland paths and trails, hunted and foraged in the prairies and forests, fished the streams and rivers near the bluffs, near where I live, for over 700 generations, then were gone in the blink of an eye. One of the richest, longest lasting cultures in human history, gone forever. And just as perplexing as this disappearance is the almost complete absence of knowledge, acknowledgement, even curiosity that the current inhabitants of this land have regarding the indigenous people who lived here for so long. Their memory is just as absent as the people themselves. Should it not be considered important to know about the people who roamed the landscape outside of our windows for 14 millennia? On an old tree stump on the bank next to me, I spot a gigantic ledge of mushrooms sprouting from its rotting bark. As I focus my gaze on its oddly architectural shape, I'm startled by a large fish flopping out of the water right next to my boat. As I flinch, the kayak wobbles and tips a bit. I overreact, instinctively trying to keep the kayak upright and have an anxious moment where I think I might have made myself tip over. At an instant, I recall my very first kayak trip in a rigid decked kayak on a mountain lake in North Carolina. These old-fashioned boats were tippy, claustrophobic. Your legs were stuck underneath the deck, and they were much less stable than my current kayak. And back there in North Carolina, I had capsized, then caught my foot under the seat as I flailed upside down to get out of the kayak. It seemed like an eternity before I struggled free, lurched to the surface, and gasped to get a life-saving gulp of air. Thrilled to emerge with my pulse racing wildly, I rejoiced at being alive. At the exact moment that I collected myself and noticed the irony of a religious skeptic thanking the heavens for being saved from a watery death, an immense water snake swam right in front of my nose. My brief moment of embracing a considerate God came to a sudden and ironic halt. But this time I didn't capsize. The boat's design is much too forgiving, and I watched the fish's dorsal fin sweep through the water, away from the concentric waves of its splash. Having once felt the primal fear of sharing a swim with a large snake, I can't help but wonder about almost sharing an intimate swim with the gigantic rat along the bank behind me. Don't think it would catch on. The Chicago area, where I lived for many years, is blessed with one of the great research libraries in America, the Newberry Library. The Newberry Library has one of the largest Native American collections in the world. And it was there that I did much of my fellowship research about the people who once lived where we live now. Many different tribes and people lived in this area over the eons, but the tribe that predominated when the settlers first arrived in earnest in the Chicago area was the Potawatomi, called themselves the Fire Nation after the great annual prairie fires that were a defining element of their historical landscape. The Potawatomi were and are proud people with a long history. Although their historical record is sparse, I did learn enough to wistfully consider the essential unfairness of their fate. Did you know, for example, that the last remnants of the Potawatomi tribes in the Chicago area lost the last of their land in 1840 when their chiefs and elders were taken to a smoke-filled back room in a Chicago hotel, plied with liquor and tobacco, and tricked into signing away the last of their claims to land in Illinois. The word Chicago, of course, is an Indian name describing the pungent odor of plants growing at the mouth of the river at the same name. You could loosely translate it as the stinky place, which, given what they did to the Potawatomi, sounds about right. I see movement behind a fallen tree along the opposite shore. There is a sudden blur of motion. A creature is visible, then quickly hidden again. After a few moments, there's another thrash of movement, and from the water behind the tree, a large bird becomes airborne, flying just above the water. I realize with delight that it's a heron, one of the most unique and beautiful creatures in Illinois. I watch until it goes out of sight around a bend in the river and marvel at its kind of clumsy grace. By the early 1900s, Indian culture was in its death throes. The remnants of tribes were on reservations around the country, usually on land that had no resources the dominant culture could exploit. The native culture imploded into a cruel sort of captivity. A few good folks recognized that the Indian culture was in danger of disappearing and took it upon themselves to venture to reservations and seek out elderly Indians to interview and to document this rapidly disappearing world. One of these people, a cultural ethnologist sponsored by the Smithsonian, was captivated by Indian music. Frances Densmore, an intriguing soul from Red Wing, Minnesota, took it upon herself to devote her entire career to traveling to Indian reservations, living among the natives, and studying the music of the various tribes. She would ask old timers about their music and have them perform the song of their youth. She recorded those performances with one of the earliest recording devices, a wax cylinder recorder obtained from Thomas Edison. She would take her field notes and recordings back to Washington, D.C., and painstakingly notate the music, the rhythms, and the words. Eventually, she published her findings in a series of books that are a motherlode of Indian music scholarship. I stumbled onto those books in the Newberry Library, books that contain seminal insights into the not just native music, but the origins of musical expression. Books that tell us so very much about the essence of Indian culture and ancient music. Every time I go paddling, I consider that I'm following a water trail almost certainly paddled by my native predecessors as they hunted and fished and moved from camp to camp. I look to the shore for animal trails, trails cut by raccoons and beavers and deers to gain access to the water. Many Indian trails along rivers and prairies and woodlands originated as animal paths. The Indians correctly assumed that the animals would choose the most efficient path between 2 points. Some trails started by deer and other animals eventually became Indian trails. Those trails later were used as the blueprints for roads for European settlers. The first cross-continent road in America, a toll road from Baltimore, Maryland to Vandalia, Illinois, was built upon the route of many old Indian trails. This national road, as it was called, provided the passage for tens of thousands of settlers through the Cumberland Gap to the woods and prairies of the Midwest. Later, it became designated US Route 40, now carries transcontinental traffic as Interstate Highways 70 and 68. From a deer path to an Indian trail to the conduit that assured the loss of Indian lands and destruction of Indian culture. More of the boundless sense of irony that this world contains. On a sandy extension from the mouth of the small inlet, I see branches scattered about at water's edge. They all have their bark stripped clean, evidence that the tiny beach had been visited by a beaver. Just back from the shore, I see a cleft in the plant growth, the opening to the path made by animals to get to the water. In her books, Frances Densmore described how Indian songs were created. And one of the creation stories of music grabbed my attention. Indian songs had many sources, many purposes. There were songs that emerged from dreams, songs praising the village chief, songs of warrior society, songs for communal ceremonies, and so forth. But there was also a personal type of song that stood out. This type of song struck me as perhaps an example of the wellspring of music, a link to music's origins. As Densmore described it, many Indian songs documented a turning point in an individual's life, a crisis that they experienced, or a dramatic life change. During the crisis, the native would leave the village, go into the wild. They would invoke the spirits and await inspiration. After a period of reflection, meditation, a melody would come to them. They'd search their souls and words for the song would emerge. Densmore's research showed that the words often bore a striking resemblance to haiku, observational, personal, filled with insight. And once inspired, they would chant their song over and over in the same way we might repeat a mantra when meditating. This repetition allowed them to enter a trance state, a waking dream state, somehow giving them strength to cope with the life crisis they faced. From that time forward, when faced with another of life's inevitable challenges, they would chant their personal song, their melodic talisman, to get them through the crisis. Imagine a song that you always carry with you for a moment when you're in need of strength. I noted the poetic nature of the American Indian spirit, noted the poetry's connection to the earth. There on the pages of Densmore's books were the words, the melodies, and the rhythms of songs good souls went into the forest to create, songs they chanted the rest of their lives, song they sang to deal with life's travails. Due to Densmore's scholarship, her sense of purpose, and carrying that recorder, lugging that recorder around the wilderness, these personal songs live on. I hope you're inspired as I am by the fact that a native went into the woods, into nature, many generations ago, and emerged with a song that gave them strength for the rest of their lives. Through the efforts of Frances Densmore, we're able to hear those melodies once more, a private moment from a soul in crisis reborn years later. You might call it digital archaeology, allowing us to hear the humanity of those who trod on this magnificent earth before us. The books are notations of the music with translations of the native language into English. But many of the actual recordings Densmore made still exist. And with the emergence of the internet, they've been transferred to digital files available online and allow us to listen to them being sung by their creators. I urge you to seek them out. In the distance, I hear cars roaring down Route 111, carrying folks with great speed to appointments and on errands to their homes and living rooms, glowing with televisions and computer games. In my little kayak, I'm connected to the rhythms of an older, more patient way of life, one with the smell of the lakes and the rivers and its banks, filled with the sights and wealth of nature. The sun has grown lower, and I reluctantly acknowledge that it's time for my paddle to end. I give a few quick strokes to one side and reverse direction. After a few minutes of paddling, past deadfall, past ancient cottonwoods hanging out from the water's edge, I see the launch along the shore of the lake, and there in the shade of a tree is my car. As I head to shore, the wind holds me back, the lake seeming to be as reluctant as me for the paddle to end. The historical record shows that Indian cultures had wars and conflicts and that they were not strangers to the kind of cruelty and cultural neuroses that plague our own times. But in terms of individual spirit and stewardship of the earth, theirs was a culture of great wisdom, a culture with much to teach us. The next time your emotional equilibrium wavers, consider going to one of the parks or forest preserves our area is blessed with. Walk across the grasses, feel the subtle give of the soil beneath your feet. Be aware of the smells of the earth, the must of decaying leaves, the scent of wildflowers, the beauty of nature's colors. Wander among the trees and listen to the wind rustling the branches and leaves. A rhythm will emerge from the branches, followed by a whisper of a melody from its leaves. Embrace these harmonies of nature, give them words, and repeat them to yourself. This is the echo of the song of your distant cousin who walked the wooded path long ago, seeking guidance and grounding in a time of crisis. May this song provide you strength as well and connect you to the substance within the music of nature, your own melodic talisman. This paddle, like all the others, gives me an opportunity to commune with the wonder of Mother Earth, moments to reflect on the interconnectedness of all things, opportunity to marvel at the grand and sublime miracle of life, the miracle that constantly renews itself, the miracle that contains a thread that connects back through the ages to creation. A few more strokes on the paddle, the shore grows closer. Like every paddle excursion, this one ends with a soft final stroke, a gentle nudge to the shore, a reverent pause before embarking, and that wistful feeling of a cherished task completed, the premonition of more journeys to come. I mentioned, obviously, the music that the natives did, that Francis Densmore recorded. I tried to get one of the songs that fascinated me to play for you this morning, and for some reason, I could not get it to play on my computer off of the internet. I should mention that I took 5 or 6 of these songs that Densmore recorded. My hobby is electronic music. I use the melodies to create some electronic music. So in the process of making it, I heard them over and over again. One of them fascinated me, and the melody's burned into my brain. The melody is and while a woman was singing it, and singing it in the native language, and I was wondering, gosh, what great wisdom is she repeating over and over in this song to achieve the meditative state. I thought, I have so much to learn from this culture. And I was able to track down Densmore's translation. And here's what I discovered she was singing. Why should I be jealous of that stupid, stupid man? And so we learn the concerns are the same for all of us. Thanks for listening. Take care.
Our service is now concluded. These are the words usually spoken in unison as we extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we're together again. So we hope you'll join us next week when Joy Heff's topic will be UU History, Part 4. And now our benediction.